mynews.studio.
Underwater gardeners, luxury hotels, and ex-fishermen? Can tourism really play a role in saving coral reefs that are dying?
Today is October 14th, 2025. When people think of Bali, they often picture its pristine beaches and colorful coral. But for a long time, tourism actually contributed to damaging those reefs. Now, there's a noticeable shift. Tourists and resorts are starting to lead efforts to restore what was lost. What's behind this change?
It's quite a turnaround. For example, the St. Regis Bali Resort has teamed up with the Nusa Dua Reef Foundation. Instead of just relaxing by the pool, guests can now take part in restoring reefs. They're invited to adopt and help plant corals. So, visitors are getting hands-on with rebuilding what tourism once damaged. Do you think most people even realize how serious things are below the surface?
Probably not. Around half of the world's coral reefs have disappeared in the last 30 years. Indonesia sits right in the middle of this crisis. Its reefs support about a quarter of all marine life. Just in Bali, there are over 500 species of fish. If the reefs disappear, we're not just talking about losing a tourist spot. It's biodiversity, fishing jobs, even natural protection for coastlines at risk. So, how do these restoration projects actually work?
The techniques are more hands-on than you might expect. Both locals and tourists use rope lines, similar to traditional seaweed farming, to grow coral fragments in shallow nurseries. Once those fragments are big enough, they're moved back onto damaged reefs and attached with simple stakes. There's also monitoring using GoPro cameras and even 3D models. But maybe the real change is using local labor and materials. That keeps things low-tech, but also scalable and affordable. How does that stack up against what's being done elsewhere?
In other parts of the world, you often see high-tech solutions, like structures coated in resin or elaborate artificial reefs. Bali's approach is different. Involving local people helps keep costs lower and makes the work sustainable. For example, they've managed to restore more than a kilometer of reef in Nusa Penida, and their so-called reef stars, simple metal frames for coral, are straightforward to set up and maintain. But why bring former fishermen into this?
That's where the social side comes in. When the pandemic hit, Bali's tourism industry collapsed, and fishing communities were hit hardest. Now, some ex-fishermen are being trained in coral biology and restoration techniques. They're shifting from harvesting reefs to protecting them, and many now lead eco-tours. These are steady jobs that offer a decent wage and a sense of purpose. There's also a feeling of local ownership. Do you think that's key for making these projects last?
I think it is. When former fishermen take on roles as guides and educators, the entire community becomes invested in the health of the reefs. Plus, there's a move towards including women in restoration and tourism jobs. But is this enough? Are these efforts really tackling the bigger issues, like climate change, or is it just a short-term fix?
That's a valid concern. The people running these projects know that restoration alone isn't enough to combat ocean warming or pollution. To make the reefs more resilient, they're using biodegradable materials, training local communities for ongoing upkeep, and staying updated as new research emerges. There's also a big focus on educating visitors, and tourism dollars help pay for restoration and monitoring in the long term. But is there any pushback about bringing more tourists to fragile ecosystems?
Yes, there is some concern. More tourists could put extra strain on the reefs, but here, the idea is to direct tourism money straight into restoration. Tours are scheduled, usually starting at 9 in the morning, and the fees support local guides and research. There are partnerships with universities to improve the science behind it all. The real problem isn't tourism itself, but tourism that isn't managed properly. Here, it's tightly controlled and has a clear purpose. Do you think this approach could work outside of Bali?
That's the goal. This mix of local knowledge, affordable techniques, and real economic incentives could be adapted elsewhere. It's not just a fix for Bali, it could be a guide for how travel and conservation can work together anywhere. Why should people outside Indonesia pay attention to this?
Coral reefs don't just matter for Indonesia. They protect shorelines, support fisheries, and are vital for global biodiversity. Losing them is a worldwide problem. If tourism can change from causing harm to helping restore nature, that's a lesson any destination could use. It's about rethinking how we interact with the environment wherever we are.
So, today we've looked at how a luxury resort, local communities, and tourists are working together to bring Bali's coral reefs back, from simple restoration techniques to new jobs for ex-fishermen. This model isn't just about saving reefs. It's showing how tourism can support entire ecosystems.
Tourism as a force for restoration instead of destruction. That's the main takeaway. Thanks for joining us as we explored how Bali's approach is shaping the future of coral reefs and responsible travel.
Thanks for listening. This episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. You can try it now for free.